everybody, it's Chari here today, and I am going to be using the cacti from the Stuck On You set to make a fun Valentine's card. So I'm going to be using the new watercolor wishes paper that is going to be available at the end of February. You could also do this card by actually watercoloring the backgrounds, but I wanted to show you how great this new paper is. So I'm going to stamp out my cacti here, and I've already stamped one out in jalapeno ink, but I felt that was a little too dark. So this one is going to be stamped in freshly cut grass. And what I'm wanting to do is have two different colors of green to use. And then the other one I'm going to stamp with celery stick. So originally I was going to use the two on the left, but in the end you'll see I'm going to use the two on the right. So I'm going to use the coordinating die that matches this little cactus here, and I'm just going to line that up, use some post-it note tape, and run it through my Cuttlebug and cut them all out. And I always try to use two pieces of tape just so nothing shifts. So here I've got them all cut out here, and this is where I was playing with them just to make sure which two colors I wanted to use. And I'll probably keep that dark one for another project. Here I've got a stitch rectangle stackable and one of the new zigzag rectangle stackables. That layers great with the stitched rectangles that are already available from Lawn Fawn. And I'm also going to use one of the heart stackables there. So I'm going to be trying to create like a sunset kind of background. So I'm wanting to use the pink for my sky. I'm going to use the yellow to make a heart, sort of like the sun that will go behind my cacti. And then I'm going to use the paler green here just to be the border behind my pink square. So I'm just going to put each of these on these papers, and I like to snug them up into the corners so I can make the most of my 6x6 papers. And then I'll just run it through my Cuttlebug machine and die cut those pieces out. So now that I've got all these pieces cut out, you can see here how I'm going to layer those pieces together. And I'm going to be using this cream cardstock base here. I also want to take that same stitched rectangle and cut it out of a piece of craft paper. So this is what I'm going to use to make my little ground for my cacti to sit on. And I'm picking the craft because it looks like sand in the desert. So I'm just going to run that through my machine. And then here is a piece of guava cardstock that I've already cut with one of the sentiment banner dies. That's where my sentiment's going to go. Right now I'm just using it as a placeholder so I can see how far up to cut my stitched hillside here. And that will create the bottom of my card for my cacti to sit on. Just want to make sure that I cut it high enough so I've got nice spacing for my banner to fit there. I don't want to cut it too low and make it feel too crowded at the bottom. So now that I have that in place, I can just run that through my cutting machine. And now I've got a nice stitching detail on the three sides as well as the hill. Now I felt like my heart here didn't quite stand out as much as I wanted it to, so I'm taking a little bit of wild honey distress ink and I'm just going to ink the edges of the heart just to make it stand out a little more. This is a good way to make pieces of patterned paper stand out from each other, inking the edge, and in this case I decided to pick a color that matched that yellow very well. Be really careful to get in that corner in the top so that you don't get too much ink there. But you can see that stands out much nicer than it did. So now for some assembly. So I'm using some foam tape to put my sand on the bottom here. I don't want it to line up all the way with the top because I want my cacti to tuck behind that, and so you can hide the bottoms of them behind this piece of paper. Now that I've got that on there, I can figure out where I wanted my heart. First, I wanted it kind of sinking behind the hill, but I felt that crowded my cacti too much, so I'm going to just center it up so that it's nicely spaced behind them. And I'm just going to use a tape runner to put this down. You could also use liquid glue. Now before I put my little cacti on here, I'm going to give them some faces. So I'm going to be using the Sweet Smile set just because it has a lot of different faces to choose from. So I've picked one face with the little eyelashes for my girl cacti here. And then for the other one, I'm going to be using the little face with the glasses for my boy. I also think the one with the mustache is super fun too, but I decided to go with the glasses on this one. These little smiles are perfectly sized for these cacti in the Stuck On You set. I'm going to be using some thin and some thick foam square dots from Scrapbook Adhesives. I'm going to be using the thin ones on my cactus that's going to be in the background, tucked behind the one in the front. And these are half the thickness of the other ones, so it gives some extra dimension without having a bunch of super thick foam going on there. So he's popped up just a little bit, and then I'm going to use the thicker ones on her and pop her up even more. So she's going to be more flush with that sand that's on the front. And I'm tucking her down just a little bit more so she looks a little shorter, so they don't look exactly the same. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my green piece of zigzag cut rectangle here. These are new dies that come out at the end of February as well, and they are super fun to layer behind the rectangle stackables you probably already have in your stash. And I've got a piece of cream cardstock here that I've cut my card base out of. And I'm just going to center that up in there. And for my other panel, I'm going to use some foam tape and pop that up and give it a little dimension off of the green square. And when I do this, I like to make sure I put a whole piece down each side so that it's nice and supported, and then one down the center as well. I'm not stingy with my craft tape when it comes to popping up panels like this. I'm also going to use the little frame clouds here, the little puffy clouds that are frames. I'm not exactly sure the name of them right off the top of my head, but they're those very thin frames. And I'm going to stamp the flower that's in the stamp set in Wild Rose ink and use the die that matches it to cut it out. And this I'm going to put on the top of the girl cacti. Put a little flower in her hair. I actually got a big old blob of glue on there and I had to get it off with this piece of scrap paper. So what you saw me do there was grab a little of the glue off the scrap paper and then put that back on her head. Now this border die here that came out at Valentine's Day will cut hearts out of paper, and I kept what was left over when I used it on a card. So I have all these little pink hearts on my desk to be used. And I just wanted to put these on their little hands here. So I'm just going to put a dot of glue on each of their, well, I call it their hands, whatever it is on a cactus. It looks like their hands. So they're going to look like the flowers that grow out of the cactus are hearts, which I think is super cute for a Valentine's Day card. And I'm just going to put one on all 4 of those. The tweezers really help to get these small pieces in the right place. Now I'm going to use those clouds frames that I cut out, and I'm using a glue pen here because these are very delicate die cuts, and this is just a ballpoint pen that is filled with glue. I'm not going to put it all the way on all the sides because this cloud's going to overhang off, and the part of the card that it's going to overhang onto is lower, and so it's not going to be actually glued down. I had it stick to my paper a little bit there, but it'll be okay because that little piece is actually going to get tucked behind the cacti. And then I'm just going to do the same thing with the smaller cloud you see there, and I'm going to tuck that behind the cactus on the left. Now for my sentiment. Here's that piece of guava cardstock that I had already cut with the sentiment banner die, and it's just going to go across the bottom. So I'm just going to simply stamp the I'm Stuck on You sentiment in black ink right in the center. Now I can put this banner across the bottom and get the sentiment on there. A lot of times I like to pop this up on foam too, but I've got a lot of foam dimension going on here. There's already 2 layers, so I'm just going to adhere that directly to the sand at the bottom. Making sure I don't put my adhesive the whole way because I only need it to stick on that brown panel. And then finally, for a little bit of sparkle, I'm going to add just the tiniest bit of stardust stickles to all the little hearts. Just gives it a little thing to catch your eye. And then here is my finished card. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.